The massive ship Eternal Dominion stretched for miles through space. Its silver hull gleamed under the light of distant stars. Inside the ship, thousands of different alien beings worked together. But they did not work as equals. The Vorthak ruled, the ship with iron fists. These creatures stood 8 feet tall with bodies made of crystal-like armor. Their arms ended in plasma cannons instead of hands. When they walked, the metal floors shook under their weight. They were the warriors, the fighters, the ones everyone feared. Their leader, Commander Zethkar, had fought in 100 battles across the galaxy. Above even the Vorthak floated the Nilathi. These beings had no solid bodies. They were made of pure energy, glowing blue and white as they moved through the air in bubble-like shields. They spoke without words, sending thoughts directly into other minds. The Nilathi controlled the ship's computers and made all the important decisions. High Teleparch Morthuin was their leader, ancient and powerful, beyond measure. The Kethmar handled all the work that kept the ship running. They looked like giant insects with sharp claws and mandibles that could cut through steel. Thousands of them worked as one mind, sharing thoughts and moving together like a perfect machine. Chief Engineer Clixandra led their hive mind operations, with cold efficiency. At the bottom of this hierarchy came the humans. Taeho Kim scrubbed the floors in the main corridor. His hands were raw from the harsh cleaning chemicals, but he did not complain. He used to be a soldier on Earth, trained to fight and protect others. Now he cleaned up after alien beings who saw him as nothing more than a slave. His sister Bo-Ra worked in the communication center. She sorted files and organized data that the Nilathi thought too simple for their great minds. Bo-Ra had studied languages on Earth and could speak 5 different tongues. Here, she was only allowed to clean equipment and carry messages. Dongmin Park crawled through the ship's maintenance tunnels. He fixed small problems with the hull and replaced broken parts. On Earth, he had designed buildings and bridges. Now he repaired things that the other aliens considered beneath their attention. The spaces were too small for the larger species, so humans did this work. Dr. Hyejin Lee cleaned medical equipment in the ship's hospital. She had once saved lives as a trauma surgeon, working in busy emergency rooms. Now she washed tools and organized supplies while alien doctors looked down on her with disgust. They thought human medicine was primitive and useless. The other species made their opinions clear every day. Vorthak warriors would push humans aside in the hallways, laughing at how easily they fell down. Soft-skinned weaklings, they would say in their deep, rumbling voices. How did such pathetic creatures ever survive on their world? The Nilathi were worse. They would send painful thoughts into human minds just for entertainment. Your species is barely above animals, they would broadcast telepathically. You think with emotions instead of logic. This makes you useless for real work. The Kethmar clicked their mandibles, and what humans learned was laughter. Humans cannot share thoughts like proper beings, they would say to each other, loud enough for humans to hear. They are isolated in their own tiny minds. How lonely and stupid they must be. Commander Zethkar held a meeting with all the human workers once a month. He would stand on a platform high above them, his crystal armor reflecting the lights. His plasma cannons would glow as he spoke. You exist here because we allow it, he would announce. You are the weakest beings on this ship. You cannot fight. You cannot think. You can barely follow simple orders. But you can clean and carry things, so we keep you alive. He would pause, letting his words sink in. Remember this. You are Class 5. Auxiliaries. When danger comes, you will be evacuated first. Not because we care about your lives, but because you would only get in the way of real warriors. True fighters cannot be slowed down by protecting the helpless. The humans would stand silent during these speeches. They had learned that speaking back only brought punishment. Taeho would clench his fists until his knuckles turned white, but he said nothing. Bo-Ra would stare at the floor, hiding the anger in her eyes. But the humans were learning. While they scrubbed floors and organized files, they watched how the ship worked. Dongmin memorized the layout of every corridor and maintenance tunnel. Woojin Chang, who worked in stellar cartography, studied how the navigation systems functioned. So Young-Yu learned about the environmental controls that kept everyone alive. Kyung-Soo Lim worked in the engine room, cleaning the massive power core that drove the ship through space. He watched the alien engineers work and began to understand how the technology functioned. The Kethmar never noticed him there, thinking he was too stupid to learn anything important. The humans also learned about each other. During their short breaks, they would gather in small groups. They shared stories about Earth, about their families and their old lives. They helped each other with the difficult work and shared what little food they were given. "We must be patient," Taiho would tell the others. "Our time will come." "When?" Bora would ask. "They treat us like animals. How long can we endure this?" "As long as we have to," Dr. Heejin would answer. "We are still alive. We are still together. That means we have hope." The ship continued its journey through space, carrying its cargo of different species toward unknown destinations. The Vorthak trained for war in their fighting chambers. The Nilathi meditated and shared thoughts in their energy bubbles. The Kethmar worked together in perfect harmony, maintaining the ship's systems, and the humans cleaned and organized and learned, always learning. They memorized the ship's layout, understood its technology, and watched how the different species interacted. They were invisible to the others, ignored as harmless and stupid. This was exactly what the humans needed. None of the proud alien species suspected that the weakest beings on the ship were preparing for something. None of them imagined that. The creatures they mocked and pushed around were studying every detail of their technology and tactics. The humans had survived the destruction of their first contact with alien species. They had endured being conquered and enslaved. They had learned to hide their intelligence and their strength behind masks of servility. Now they waited. The galaxy had judged them as weak and worthless. Soon, the galaxy would learn just how wrong it was about the human species. But that lesson would come at a price no one could imagine. For now, the humans continued their work, invisible and ignored, gathering knowledge and strength for the day when everything would change. The Eternal Dominion changed course toward the most dangerous region of known space. The Void Nebula stretched across thousands of light years, a dark cloud where stars died and ships vanished without trace. No expedition had ever returned from its center. The ship's mission was to map this deadly region and discover what happened to the missing vessels. It was dangerous work, but the Federation believed their strongest ship could handle any threat. After all, they had the mighty Vorthak, warriors, the brilliant Nilathi telepaths, and the efficient Kethmar technicians. The humans had been aboard for 6 months now. They knew every corridor, every system, every hidden passage in the great ship. While cleaning and maintaining, they had learned things the alien species never bothered to teach them. Wu Jin Chang worked in the stellar cartography department. His job was to organize star charts and clean the viewing screens. But while doing this simple work, he studied the readings from the Void Nebula. The patterns he saw worried him. The nebula was not empty space filled with gas and dust. Something lived there. The energy readings showed movement, intelligence, purpose. When Wu Jin tried to show these patterns to the Nilathi scientists, they dismissed him with telepathic laughter. Primitive pattern recognition, High Scholar Yithplex broadcast into his mind. Your brain sees threats where none exist. This is why humans were never meant for scientific work. But Wu Jin kept watching the readings. The patterns grew stronger as the ship moved deeper into the nebula's edge. So Young-Yu maintained the environmental systems that kept the air breathable and the temperature stable. While checking the sensors throughout the ship, she noticed strange energy fluctuations. The readings spiked and dropped in ways that made no sense according to normal physics. She reported her findings to the Kethmar technicians. Chief Engineer Clixandra clicked her mandibles in annoyance. "Your equipment reading skills are primitive," she buzzed. "These fluctuations are normal for nebula regions. Your species lacks the technical knowledge to interpret the data correctly." But, so Young knew her readings were accurate. Something was interfering with the ship's systems, something the aliens refused to acknowledge. Dr. Hai-Jin Lee worked in the medical bay, sterilizing equipment and organizing supplies. She noticed that the alien crew members were becoming more agitated as they entered the nebula. The Vorthak warriors started fights over small disagreements. The Nilathi telepaths complained of headaches and disturbed meditation. Even the usually calm Kethmar seemed nervous and jumpy. When she mentioned this to Chief Medical Officer Vrexthol, the alien doctor waved her away. Humans cannot understand the complex psychology of superior species, he said. Your observations are meaningless. But Hye-jin continued to watch. The behavioral changes were real and growing worse each day. Tai-ho Kim cleaned the command bridge every morning before the senior officers arrived. While scrubbing the floors, he listened to their conversations. The alien commanders were worried about something, though they tried to hide it from the crew. The sensor readings are unusual, Commander Zethkar admitted to High Teleparch Morthuan during one morning briefing. The nebula affects our instruments, the Nilathi leader replied telepathically, but our technology is superior to any threat we might encounter. We will complete our mission as planned. But Taeho heard uncertainty in their voices. Even the most powerful beings in the Federation were nervous about the Void Nebula. Bo-Ra Kim worked in communications, filing reports and maintaining equipment. She began to notice that some of the older reports contained warnings about the nebula. Ships had been disappearing for decades, always in the same region. The few partial distress calls that were received mentioned shadows in space and whispers in the darkness. When she tried to bring these reports to the attention of Communication Chief Claxmore, the Kethmar officer dismissed her concerns. Old reports from inferior ships with poor equipment, he buzzed. The Eternal Dominion is the most advanced vessel ever built. We have nothing to fear from legends and ghost stories. But Bo-Ra kept reading the reports. The pattern of disappearances was too consistent to ignore. Kyung-Soo Lim maintained the ship's power core deep in the engine section. As they moved deeper into the nebula, he noticed that the massive fusion reactor was behaving strangely. It resonated with something in the surrounding space, creating harmonics that shouldn't exist. He tried to report this to the chief engineers, but the Kethmar technicians were too busy to listen to a human maintenance worker. Impossible, Chief Engineer Clixandra buzzed when he persisted. Your readings are faulty. Humans lack the technical knowledge to understand reactor operations. But Kyung-Soo could feel the vibrations in the ship's hull. Something was responding. To their power core, something that lived in the dark spaces between stars. The human crew members began meeting in secret during their short break periods. They shared their observations and concerns in hidden corners of the ship where the alien species never went. The readings are wrong, Wu Jin said quietly. This isn't a normal nebula. Something intelligent is out there. The ship's systems are being affected, So Young added. Whatever's in the nebula, it's already starting to interfere with our technology. The crew is changing too, Dr. Hyojin reported. They're becoming more aggressive, more paranoid. It's like something is influencing their minds. Taeho nodded grimly. The commanders are worried, but they're too proud to admit it. They think their superior technology will protect them. What should we do? Bo-Ra asked. We prepare, Taeho said. We learn everything we can about this ship. We watch and we wait. Wait for what? Dongmin asked. For the moment when the aliens realize they need us, Taeho replied. It's coming sooner than they think. As the Eternal Dominion pushed deeper into the Void Nebula, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered in empty corridors. Whispers echoed through the ventilation systems. Crew members reported seeing shadows moving just outside their vision. The ship's AI, controlled by the Nilathi telepaths, started giving contradictory orders. Systems would shut down for no reason, then restart themselves. The navigation computers showed different readings every few minutes. The alien species had built their civilization on the belief that greater physical strength, superior mental abilities, and advanced technology could solve any problem. They looked down on humans as weak creatures who relied on primitive emotions and simple tools. But as the Eternal Dominion entered the heart of the Void Nebula, that belief was about to be tested in ways none of them could imagine. The greatest threat in the galaxy didn't care about crystal armor or telepathic powers or hive mind coordination. It cared about consciousness itself, and it was very, very hungry. The humans continued their work, cleaning and maintaining and watching. They saw the signs that the proud alien species refused to acknowledge. They prepared for a disaster that the ship's commanders insisted was impossible. Soon the galaxy would learn that sometimes the greatest strength comes from those who are underestimated. Sometimes survival depends not on superior abilities, but on the willingness to adapt and help others when everything falls apart. The lesson was coming, and it would be written in the wreckage of the most powerful ship ever built. The attack came without warning in the middle of the ship's night cycle. One moment, the Eternal Dominion was sailing through the dark nebula. The next, reality itself seemed to tear apart. They poured through the hull like water through a net. The ship's shields designed to stop plasma cannons and nuclear warheads might as well have been made of paper. The Wraith Collective had found new prey, and they were hungry. The creatures had no solid form. They were living darkness, shadow, given consciousness and malevolent purpose. They flowed through corridors like liquid night, seeking the brightest minds to devour. And in a ship filled with telepathic Nilathi, warrior Vorthak, and hive-minded Kethmar, there were many bright minds to choose from. High Teleparch Morthuan was the first to understand what was happening. His powerful telepathic abilities made him the most attractive target. The ancient being tried to send a warning to the rest of the ship, but the wraiths fell upon him like starving wolves. His final telepathic scream echoed through every mind on the ship. They're eating our thoughts. They feed on consciousness itself. We cannot. Then silence. The most powerful telepath in the Federation was gone. His mind consumed and his energy body dissolved into nothing. Commander Zethkar felt the telepathic death scream and immediately understood the ship was under attack. He rallied his Vorthak warriors, their crystal armor gleaming as plasma cannons charged to full power. "Form defensive positions," he roared. "Protect the vital systems. Show these creatures the might of the Vorthak." The warriors took their positions and opened fire. Plasma bolts bright as small suns filled the corridors, energy weapons that could melt through starship armor. But the wraiths simply flowed around the attacks like smoke avoiding a candle flame. The creatures passed through the crystal warrior's armor as if it didn't exist. One moment a proud Vorthak stood ready for battle. The next he collapsed as his mind was torn from his body and devoured. Their greatest strength, their impenetrable armor, was useless against an enemy that attacked the soul itself. Commander, Zethkar watched his warriors fall one by one. These were veterans who had conquered dozens of worlds, fought in the greatest battles of galactic history. Now they died helplessly, their minds eaten by creatures they couldn't even touch. "Retreat," he ordered, his voice cracking with desperation. "Fall back to secure positions." But there were no secure positions. The wraiths flowed through walls and floors and ceilings like they were empty space. The Kethmar tried to coordinate, a defense using their hive mind connection. Chief Engineer Clixandra linked with thousands of her kind, sharing thoughts and strategies instantly. Their collective intelligence should have found a solution. Instead, the wraiths turned their greatest strength against them. The hive mind that allowed perfect cooperation also provided a highway directly into every Kethmar consciousness. When the wraiths attacked one drone, they attacked them all. The corruption spread through the hive mind like poison through water. Kethmar began turning on each other, their shared thoughts twisted into paranoia and madness. The perfect order that had made them invaluable to the Federation dissolved into chaos and violence. Clixandra felt her people's minds breaking one by one. She tried to sever the hive mind connection, but it was too late. The madness had already spread too far. Her last coherent thought was a realization that their unity had become their weakness. Within hours, the ship's command structure had collapsed. The Nilathi leadership was gone, consumed by creatures that found their telepathic abilities irresistible. The Vorthak warriors lay scattered through the corridors, their crystal bodies intact but their minds devoured. The Kethmar had descended into insanity, their hive mind corrupted beyond repair. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the ship. Hull breaches appeared as systems failed. The life support flickered on and off. The Eternal Dominion, pride of the Federation fleet, was dying. And in the midst of this chaos, The humans discovered something remarkable. They were being ignored. Tae-ho Kim crouched in a maintenance corridor, watching a wraith flow past just inches from his face. The creature paused, seeming to sense his presence, then moved on without attacking. His mind, considered primitive by the aliens, was apparently not worth the effort to consume. Bora Kim found the same thing when she hid in the communications center. Wraiths searched the room, devouring the consciousness of alien technicians, but passed by her hiding spot without interest. Her simple human thoughts didn't attract their attention. Dr. Hai-Jin Lee worked frantically in the medical bay, treating wounded aliens who had previously treated her with contempt. Vorthak warriors begged for her help, their pride forgotten in the face of terror. Niluthi energy beings flickered weakly, their power almost exhausted. Even Kethmar drones sought her aid, their hive mind connection severed, and their individual minds struggling to cope. "Please," whispered a wounded Vorthak lieutenant named Gorthkalik. His crystal armor was cracked and one of his plasma cannons had been torn away. "Help me, I don't want to die." He-Jin worked to seal his wounds with human medical techniques the aliens had scorned. "You're going to be okay," she said softly. "I won't let you die." The alien warrior looked at her with new eyes. "We called you weak," he whispered. "But you're here, helping us, when you could have run away." Dongmin Park and Kyung-Soo Lim found themselves in charge of keeping the ship's vital systems running. The alien engineers were gone, dead or mad or hiding in terror. Only the humans remained calm enough to work. "The power core is destabilizing," Kyung-Soo reported. "If we don't fix it soon, the whole ship will explode." "Can we repair it?" Dongmin asked. "Not with alien technology," Kyung-Soo replied. "But I think I can jury-rig something using human engineering principles. The aliens always said our methods were crude and primitive." "Maybe crude is what we need right now," Dongmin said. So Young Yu and Wu Jin Chang worked together to map the ship's corridors, tracking wraith movements and finding safe passages for survivors. Their primitive pattern recognition allowed them to predict where the creatures would appear next. "The wraiths are following energy signatures," Wu Jin reported. "They're drawn to powerful minds and complex thoughts. That's why they ignore us," So Young realized. "Our minds aren't complex enough to interest them." It was the ultimate irony. The humans had been dismissed as too simple, too primitive, too weak. Now that simplicity was keeping them alive, while the superior species fell prey to creatures that fed on advanced consciousness. But the wraiths were learning, adapting, becoming more interested in human minds as they proved more capable than expected. The creatures began to notice that the humans were organizing resistance, helping survivors, keeping the ship running. As the hours passed, more wraiths began hunting the humans specifically. The window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Tae-ho gathered the surviving humans in a hidden section of the ship. Around them, they could hear the sounds of the Eternal Dominion tearing itself apart. Metal groaned under stress. Explosions echoed through the corridors. Emergency alarms blared constantly. "The ship is dying," he said simply. "The alien command structure is gone. If anyone is going to survive this, it has to be us who saves them." "Us?" Bora asked. "We're just maintenance workers and janitors. What can we do against creatures that destroyed the Federation's greatest warriors?" Tae-ho looked around at his fellow humans. These people who had been dismissed as weak and worthless. These beings who scrubbed floors and organized files while the galaxy's superior species made the important decisions. "We do what humans have always done," he said. "We adapt. We survive. And we help others survive too, even when they don't deserve it." Outside their hiding place, the Eternal Dominion continued its death spiral. But for the first time since the attack began, there was hope. The weakest species in the galaxy was about to show everyone what real strength looked like. The surviving aliens had no choice left. Their leaders were dead or insane. Their technology had failed. Their superior abilities meant nothing against an enemy that ate consciousness itself. For the first time in galactic history, the inferior humans became the ones in charge. Tae-ho Kim took control of what remained of the ship's crew. The irony was not lost on him. The man who used to scrub floors now commanded beings who had once treated him like dirt. But there was no time to think about justice or revenge. There were lives to save. "Bora, take over communications," he ordered. "Use the old radio systems." The Wraith seemed to interfere with the telepathic networks, but they ignore primitive technology. His sister nodded and ran to the communication center. The sophisticated alien systems were useless, crackling with static and interference. But the simple human radio equipment still worked. She began broadcasting on all frequencies, calling scattered survivors to rally points throughout the ship. "This is Bo-Ra Kim, emergency coordinator." She spoke into the microphone. "All survivors, report to designated safe zones. Follow human personnel for evacuation instructions. Repeat, follow human personnel." The responses came back in dozens of alien languages, voices filled with terror and desperation. Proud Vorthak warriors who had never shown fear now pleaded for help. Brilliant Nalathi scholars begged for guidance. Efficient Kethamar drones asked for orders from the species they had considered too stupid to think. Wu Jin Chang and So Young Yu worked together to map safe routes through the dying ship. Their careful observations of the Wraith's behavior patterns allowed them to predict where the creatures would hunt next. "They avoid the lower engineering sections," Wu Jin reported. "The background radiation from the power core seems to mask our life signs. The medical bay is also relatively safe," So Young added. "Something about the healing equipment interferes with their senses." They created a network of safe passages, using maintenance corridors and service tunnels that the larger alien species had never bothered to explore. The humans' small size and flexibility, once seen as weaknesses, now became crucial advantages. Dr. Haye Jin Lee transformed the medical bay into a treatment center for all species. Alien physiology was different from human biology, but trauma was trauma. Bleeding was bleeding, pain was pain. Her training as a surgeon served her well as she worked to save lives that alien medical protocols would have written off. A wounded Nalathi energy being flickered weakly on her treatment table. Its telepathic voice was barely a whisper. "Why do you help us? We treated your species terribly." "Because it's the right thing to do," Hyojin replied, adjusting the energy containment field that kept the alien's consciousness stable. "When someone is hurt, you help them. It doesn't matter who they are or what they've done." The Nalathi's energy form pulsed with something that might have been wonder. "Your species calls this compassion. We thought it was weakness. Maybe weakness and strength aren't what everyone thinks they are," Hyojin said softly. Dongmin Park and Kyungsoo Lim worked frantically to keep the ship's vital systems running. The alien engineers were gone, and the automated systems were failing one by one. Only human ingenuity kept life support functioning and the lights on. "The aliens built everything to be efficient and elegant," Kyungsoo muttered as he rewired a power junction with human tools. "But elegant doesn't work when half your circuits are fried." "Human engineering is messier," Dongmin agreed, jerry-rigging an atmospheric processor with spare parts. "But messy means it can be fixed with whatever's available." They used techniques that alien engineers had dismissed as crude and primitive. Duct tape and wire nuts, manual overrides and mechanical backups. Simple solutions that worked when sophisticated technology failed. The aliens who worked with them watched in amazement. "Your methods are so basic," observed a surviving Kethamar technician named Takiksmel. "But they function when ours do not." "Sometimes basic is better," Kyungsoo replied. "Complex systems break down. Simple ones keep working." Taeho organized the evacuation with military precision. He divided the survivors into teams, each led by a human who knew the ship's layout. The plan was dangerous but simple. Get everyone to the escape pods before the ship's hull failed completely. The humans split into rescue teams. Ji Hwan Choi led a group to the residential sections, searching for survivors trapped in their quarters. Min Kyung-an organized supply runs, gathering food, water, and emergency equipment. Seok Jin Nam maintained communication relays, keeping all teams in contact as they moved through the dying ship. The work was exhausting and terrifying. Wraiths still hunted through the corridors, drawn by the activity of the rescue operations. The ship continued to fall apart around them, with hull breaches and system failures creating new dangers every hour. But the humans pressed on. They carried wounded aliens who outweighed them by hundreds of pounds. They crawled through damaged sections where larger species couldn't fit. They stayed calm when everyone else panicked, thinking clearly when fear clouded alien minds. Commander Zethkar was found in a sealed command bunker, surrounded by the bodies of his warriors. The massive Vorthak was wounded and traumatized, his crystal armor cracked, and his plasma cannons destroyed. When Teho's team reached him, the proud warrior was curled in a corner shaking with fear. "Commander," Teho said gently, "we're here to get you out." Zethkar looked up with eyes that had seen too much death. "My warriors are gone," he whispered. "The strongest beings in the galaxy, and we fell like wheat before a storm." "But you're alive," Teho replied. "That's what matters now." The Vorthak commander studied the human who had once scrubbed his floors. "We called your species weak. We were wrong, weren't we?" "Strength comes in different forms," Teho said. "Right now, we need to focus on getting you to safety." As they helped the massive alien to his feet, Zethkar spoke quietly. "We never understood. True strength isn't about being the most powerful. It's about standing up when everything falls down." Throughout the ship, similar scenes played out. Humans risked their lives to save aliens who had treated them as slaves. They showed compassion to beings who had shown them only contempt. They demonstrated courage that put the legendary Vorthak warriors to shame. High Scholar Yithplex, one of the few surviving Nilathi, was rescued from a collapsed laboratory. Her energy form was almost completely drained, barely a flicker of consciousness remaining. As the humans carried her to safety in a portable containment field, she managed to send one weak telepathic message. "We measured worth by power and intelligence. But we forgot the most important strength of all, the willingness to help others even when it costs you everything." The evacuation continued through the ship's final hours. The hull groaned under stress as structural supports failed. Wraiths flowed through the corridors in increasing numbers, sensing that their prey was trying to escape. The power core fluctuated wildly, threatening to explode and take everyone with it. But the humans didn't give up. They adapted to each new crisis, found solutions to impossible problems, and never stopped trying to save as many lives as possible. The species that had been dismissed as too weak to matter became the only hope for survival. As they worked, a new understanding spread among the alien survivors. The galactic hierarchy had been built on a fundamental lie. True strength wasn't about having the biggest weapons or the most advanced minds or the most efficient systems. True strength was about carrying others when they couldn't carry themselves. And in that measure, the humans were the strongest species anyone had ever encountered. The final evacuation was about to begin, but the hardest test was still ahead. Getting to the escape pods was one thing. Actually, getting everyone off the ship alive would require miracles that only human determination could provide. The Eternal Dominion had minutes left to live. The great ship's hull cracked like breaking glass as structural supports failed throughout its length. Emergency lights flickered and died. The air itself seemed to scream as metal tore apart under impossible stress. In the escape pod bays, the final evacuation had become a race against time and death itself. Thousands of wraiths swarmed through every corridor now, drawn by the concentrated life signs of the survivors. The creatures had learned to hunt humans specifically, recognizing them as the organizers of resistance. Taeho Kim stood in the main evacuation bay, coordinating the final refugee groups. Around him, aliens who had once commanded star fleets now waited for orders from a human janitor. The irony might have been funny if they weren't all about to die. "Pod 7 is ready for launch," Bora reported over the radio. 47 Kethmar survivors and 12 humans aboard. "Pod 12 has a malfunction." Ji-Hwan Choi's voice crackled through the static. "The launch system won't engage." "I'm on it," Dongmin Park replied, already running toward the damaged pod with his repair kit. The escape pods had been designed for specific alien physiologies. The Vorthak pods were massive, built to hold their crystal warriors. The Nilathi pods were filled with energy containment systems. The Kethmar pods had hive mind communication networks. but none of them were designed to hold mixed groups of different species. The humans had to physically modify each pod, ripping out species-specific equipment and cramming in emergency life support for whoever needed evacuation. Dr. Hyejin Lee worked frantically in Pod 4, treating the most critically wounded survivors. Her patients included Commander Zethkar, whose crystal armor was cracked in dozens of places, and High Scholar Yithplex, whose energy form flickered weakly in a portable containment field. The Vorthak's internal injuries are severe, she reported. I don't know if he'll survive the journey to the nearest station. Do what you can, Taeho replied. We can't help anyone if we don't get off this ship first. The hardest part was the physical evacuation itself. Many of the alien survivors were too large or too injured to move on their own. The humans had to carry them, their weak frames straining under alien weight that would have crushed normal people. Seokjin Nam and Kyungsoo Lim worked together to carry a wounded Vorthak warrior named Gorth Kalik. The massive crystalline being weighed over 800 pounds and his armor cut into their hands as they struggled to move him. I can walk, Gorth Kalik protested weakly. No, you can't, Seokjin replied, breathing hard from the effort. Your leg is broken in 3 places. Why are you doing this? The alien warrior asked. After everything we did to your people? Kyungsoo looked down at the being who had once kicked him aside in the corridors. Because someone has to, he said simply. Min Kyung-an and So Young-yu guided a group of terrified Nilathi survivors, telepaths who had never learned to navigate without their mental networks. The energy beings flickered with panic as they tried to follow verbal directions instead of shared thoughts. Stay close to us, Min Kyung said patiently. We'll guide you to the evacuation pod. This is so strange, one of the Nilathi broadcast, weakly, moving without the hive mind, depending on verbal communication. How do you isolated beings function this way? Practice, So Young replied. Lots and lots of practice. The ship's death throes were getting worse. Whole sections of the hull were collapsing now, creating new hazards every few seconds. Wraiths flowed through the breaches like living darkness, hunting the fleeing survivors. Wu Jin Chang ran through the corridors with updated route information, warning evacuation teams about new dangers. Deck 7 is completely compromised, he reported. Wraith concentration is too high. All teams need to use the maintenance passages. But the maintenance passages were too small for most aliens. The humans had to help them crawl through spaces designed for much smaller beings, supporting their weight and guiding them through the narrow tunnels. Taeho made one final sweep through the ship, searching for any survivors they might have missed. In a collapsed section of the science labs, he found a group of young Kethmar drones who had been trapped when their hive mind connection was severed. The insectoid beings huddled together in terror, unable to coordinate without their shared consciousness. They had never learned to function as individuals, and the isolation was driving them to panic. It's okay, Taeho said softly, crawling through the twisted wreckage to reach them. I'm here to help. The lead drone, barely more than a juvenile, clicked her mandibles in confusion. We cannot hear the others. We are alone in our minds. How do you stand it? One thought at a time, Taeho replied, beginning to clear debris from around them. You don't need the hive mind to survive. You just need to believe in yourself. Getting the Kethmar through the wreckage required all of Taeho's flexibility and strength. The passage was too narrow for their insectoid bodies, so he had to support their weight, while they squeezed through gaps barely wide enough for their shells. By the time he reached the evacuation bay with his rescued group, most of the pods had already launched. The Eternal Dominion was in its final moments, the hull integrity failing catastrophically. Taeho, Bora called from the last remaining pod. We have to go now. He looked around the bay one final time, making sure no one had been left behind. The ship groaned around them as another section collapsed somewhere in the distance. Wraiths poured through the breaches, sensing that their prey was about to escape. Everyone aboard, he ordered, helping the last of the Kethmar into the overcrowded. How to seal the hatch. The escape pod launched just as the Eternal Dominion's power core finally exploded. The great ship that had been the pride of the Federation tore itself apart in a burst of light, visible from several star systems away. In the cramped confines of the escape pod, survivors of a dozen different species huddled together. Vorthak, warriors sat next to human maintenance workers. Nilathi scholars shared space with Korean engineers. Kethmar drones learned to function as individuals for the first time in their lives. Commander Zethkar, his crystal armor dim and cracked, looked at Taiho with something approaching awe. 50,000 beings served on that ship, he said quietly. Less than 3,000 survived. How many of those 3,000 are alive because humans carried them to safety? Asked High Scholar Yithplex, her energy form flickering weakly in its containment field. They did the count in silence. Of the survivors, nearly 800 owed their lives directly to human rescue efforts. The species that made up less than 0.4% of the original crew had saved over 25% of those who lived. We called you weak, Zethkar continued. We measured strength by the force of our weapons and the power of our minds. But when everything fell apart, when our strength meant nothing, you were the ones who carried us. A young Kethmar drone named Vixthel, still learning to speak as an individual rather than part of the collective, clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. Strength is not about power over others. It is about the willingness to help others when they cannot help themselves. The human concept of compassion Yithplex broadcast weekly. We thought it made you vulnerable. Instead, it made you the strongest species any of us had ever encountered. Bora Kim looked around the crowded pod at beings who had once treated her as less than nothing. Now they looked at her and her fellow humans with respect, gratitude, and something approaching worship. We're not heroes, she said quietly. We just did what anyone should do. That's exactly what makes you heroes, Zethkar replied. The rescue ships found them 3 days later, drifting in the empty space where the Eternal Dominion had died. The survivors were taken to Federation medical stations, where the story of the disaster spread quickly through all the civilized worlds. But it wasn't told as a story of defeat. It was told as a story of discovery. The discovery that the galaxy had been wrong about everything it thought it knew about strength and weakness. The Galactic Federation rebuilt itself around new principles. The rigid hierarchy based on physical power and mental superiority was abolished. In its place came a system that valued compassion, adaptability, and the willingness to help others. Humans were no longer classified as Class 5 auxiliaries. They became the backbone of the new Federation, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they understood something the other species had forgotten. True strength comes from lifting others up, not putting them down. Tai-Ho. Kim became the first human admiral in Federation history. Bora established new emergency protocols that prioritized cooperation over hierarchy. Dr. Hyejin's medical techniques became standard practice across all worlds. The phrase, strong enough to carry others, became the motto of the new Federation, and whenever anyone suggested that compassion was weakness, the survivors of the Eternal Dominion had a simple response. Tell that to the ones we carried out of the wreckage. Years later, when children of all species learned about the disaster, in the Void Nebula, they learned more than just history. They learned that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones nobody expects. They learned that real strength isn't about being powerful. It's about being willing to carry others when they can't carry themselves. And they learned that the weakest can become the strongest when they have the courage to care about someone other.